So we're just coming in hot today. DK getting a little sassy there in the chat. I'm Sean Stiers. He's Jesse Stiers as we start off this Thursday edition of IB Nation Sports Talk. Glad to have you with us here today. But DK given 3-1 odds that I'm wearing my WKRP t-shirt. Jesse, do you remember what shirt I had on in the back room as we were getting ready to start this show?
No, it wasn't the WKRP shirt, though, was it?
No, it's not. It would be
that
red.
One's red. Yeah, that one's red.
Not WKRP today. I don't know where this came from, DK, but I did see people talking about Les Nessman and the Mr. Carlson has got as my witness. There it is. Matt has got as my witness. I thought turkeys could fly. We are coming up on that. I mean, that was a Thanksgiving episode of WKRP, so we're just a couple of weeks away from that. So maybe I'm saving WKRP for that. Maybe I'm retiring the WKRP t-shirt.
I don't think you would do that.
You don't think I'd do it?
No.
I just might. If you kids don't watch yourself, how you doing today?
It's Friday Eve. I'm doing great. This week's been really easy work-wise. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm in a role now where, like, if I have a ton of work and the people below me don't have a ton of work, I just pass it off. And it's better that they're filled up with work and I might not have as much work, but that's fine. That's kind of how it's supposed to be. So,
okay.
Just waiting for projects to really kick off. I was telling you about that one I'm going to have in Bel Air, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
That will be fun. I have another one near like Richmond, Virginia that's starting here soon. But until those like fully break, I am enjoying kind of not having to work strenuous hours every week. Tomorrow's payday. Third show of the week. I thought Vince and I had a fun time yesterday with the mailbag and the rapid fire and all that good stuff. So, I got no complaints.
I caught most of rapid fire. Didn't hear the mailbag. Maybe I'll surprise you with something that came up in rapid fire yesterday in our own rapid fire.
Okay.
We've got we in, we out questions coming up in a little bit. We're going to start with Marcus Freeman. Comments. Joe says WKRP is a poor man's friends. That's interesting. A little bit different, but WKRP wasn't everybody's taste. That's why it only lasted for like 3 seasons or whatever. But like back then, that's when they made 25 to 30 episodes of TV per season back in the 70s and 80s. So it was basically like today, that's worth what? 5 to 8 seasons of like if you make a 10 episode season these days, on the streamers especially, I mean, you're going overboard practically. So
how about Kate Koval last night? 6 blocks.
How about her? SWAT party. Man.
That's a lot of blocks and 16 rebounds. That's the definition of getting big.
First double-double. She was very big. And it was interesting. I don't know if you got to see any of it or listen to any of it, but the post matchup was Kate Koval from Ukraine, and James Madison had a Russian from Moscow.
Kozlova?
Kozlova, I believe. Wow. Yes. Hey, before we really get going here, I do want to tell you about my bookie, the one book that's got your back with no fluff, no second guessing, just straight up action and you in total control. And my bookie, it's never been about guessing. It's about giving you the edge. So every bet you place comes with confidence and a plan. If you know football and you love to win, well, quite frankly, my bookie was made for you. And if you're new, step up. Use our promo code IRISH. That'll double your bankroll with 100% deposit bonus right from the jump. That's more money and more power to make winning plays. That is the promo code IRISH. Bet anything, anytime, from anywhere with my bookie.
Speaking of my bookie, have you looked at any matchups this weekend? Any odds that strike you? Any matchups you're like, that could be interesting?
Haven't looked deep. I've had a lot of other stuff like a basketball game yesterday. I tell you what, like 2 basketball games in 4 days, and also this show, like the week gets scrambled a little bit. Let's just put it that way. So no, the only line that I saw that really, and this is probably the only line that I've even looked at this week. BYU is only a 2.5-point favorite at home against Kansas.
That is correct. That's one I was going to mention as one that I've noticed. And the other one that I've noticed is Arizona State is an 8.5 dog against Kansas State, and both of those teams are 7-2 going into that matchup. So a couple Big 12 matchups that I'm looking at early on. Might have to throw those together with the parlay on my bookie. Last week I had that nice my bookie bet that hit when I took Georgia Tech to cover the spread against Miami, and they did it, and they won it, and that was great. I've won a lot of money off of that.
Nice. Very nice. I'll have to look. I got to make my picks still, and I got to get those. I got to get it actually, my picks sent to Brian. I think we're only picking like Notre Dame and 2 other games this week. Not a lot.
I'm guessing Tennessee
Honestly,
and Georgia will be on that slate.
Pretty sure it is. And I can't remember what the third one is. But
probably if I had to bet, it would be Pittsburgh and Clemson. That sounds right.
Let me look here and see if I can find it real quick.
That's another one that's interesting.
No.
Clemson's favored by 12 at Pittsburgh, and they both have a 7-2 record.
Tennessee, Georgia, LSU, Florida, and of course Notre Dame and Virginia. Those are the only 3 games we're picking this week. So look for those. Yeah, Joe was thinking of the wrong show, by the way. He said, wait, is WKRP the one about the psychiatrist from Cheers? No, he was a talk show psychologist, psychiatrist or whatever on the radio. But yeah, wrong. He was on the radio anyway, but wrong show. All right, well, let's get into some things that Marcus Freeman talked about today in his noon Zoom, starting with Jack Kaiser, set to break Notre Dame's record for games played with his 63rd career game this Saturday.
Obviously, Jack is special to me just because he's the only player in this program I actually had a chance to coach as a position, be his position coach. And to see his growth as a football player and a leader over these 4 years we've been together has been tremendous. He is truly a Notre Dame man. He's obviously a guy that grew up here in Indiana, but just really reached his full potential. That's a guy, when I think about individuals that reach their full potential, Jack Kaiser has definitely done that. And he's been an unbelievable leader. He's made this place better, and he's going to leave this place better than he found it. And so really, it's going to be a great moment for him. But, he's got a lot of memories that he's made here at Notre Dame.
A lot of memories and a lot of mileage. 63 games. I don't think anyone's ever going to break it once he's, because obviously he's going to keep going for the rest of this. He's still got basically 3 games in the regular season, got playoff games and all that. I don't think that record's ever going to be broken. Do you?
No, I don't think that record will be broken. I was just kind of doing some math. He's already at 64 games. It's essentially 5 full seasons if you include the bowl game.
That's true. And I mean, 49 tackles, 62 tackles last year was his career high. He's at 49 right now, so he's going to set up, career high in tackles. He's leading the team in tackles right now, and he's just, you brought him back for what he's given them to kind of help, sort of solidify, basically be a coach on the field for these young linebackers. And as good a coach as Max Bulla is, I think that you can make a case that the development of these young guys, that Jack Kaiser's played a big part in that as well. Definitely.
They the linebacker core for Notre Dame this season was going to be extremely talented. It was just going to be extremely young. And you needed someone like Jack Kaiser to be kind of the backbone of the defense and be, kind of a learning board for these young guys to bounce off questions, to, he can lead by example of showing these guys how to get the defense lined up and all of those things. And I do believe that Jack Kaiser will go on to the NFL as well. I don't know if he'll get drafted, but I think he'll at least make, a training camp roster and have the potential, to make an NFL team at some point. But it's really cool to think about, because when I was reading this question, the first thing that came to mind is just like how awesome it is that he got to spend so much time playing so much football on the best place on earth, in my eyes, and probably
Sure.
in his eyes too. I know growing up in Indiana, it was, a childhood dream of his. And so to maximize that time and utilize it as much as possible has to be like, he has to have no regrets at the end of the day. And that has to be something to feel really good about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Royal Center, Indiana, where he's from. It's a dot in farmland, southwest of South Bend, basically. And, he showed up, you remember, was that episode 2 of the Here Come the Irish series, and you kind of got to see him out there farming and all that kind of stuff. I think he's going to be fairly borderline. Joe's asking about draft worthy. I think he's going to kind of be on that bubble. What do you think?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was hinting at. I think he could be a late round guy. I definitely think Bertrand was better, and I think Bertrand got a little bit more. I can't remember I think he went 5th round to the Falcons.
Yes.
So I would see him really being that last day kind of 7th round guy. But again, even if he doesn't get drafted, I think he'll end up being, basically an undrafted free agent, essentially, and he'll end up on someone's training camp roster.
Yeah, 63 games, going to break the career record.
I think the biggest thing, especially that's going to be on his resume, is, and this is what I think a lot of people found impressive about Bertrand and Maris Liufau in this past draft cycle, is the understanding of high-level defense, and I think that kind of bridges maybe some of that athleticism gap where he can get in and understand an NFL defense system earlier and be able to kind of navigate. And that's because of Al Golden and the defense that he's been running at Notre Dame. So I think that it's worth taking a shot on someone like Jack Kaiser from an NFL perspective because of the knowledge that he has at the end of the day.
No, that's a good point. I mean, that's obviously what elevated Liufau's stock so high, was just the defense that he played in, his ability to comprehend the system, know where he needs to be, and all that kind of stuff. Even though not everything was always perfect, that helped. Him. And I think that, like, the speed is going to be the biggest thing for him. Is he going to be fast enough to play in the NFL? The comprehension is going to be there, but at the very least, he's someone who can definitely fill a lot of roles on a special teams unit as a young guy, if he's able to make a roster. So, but I think he's going to be, he'll be a day 3 type guy, assuming that he does get picked. But
what do you think his 40 time is?
Man, I don't know. I'm not good at predicting that kind of stuff. What do you think?
Well, I looked it up, so I cheated. He's about a 4.65.
I would have said 4.8, after you said that, but 4.65, not far off. And that was when he was being recruited, right?
No, it says he ran it at a pro day, but I don't know if he just participated in a pro day last season, just kind of being out there, but I don't know when that pro day would have been.
I have no idea when that would have been either. Interesting.
Oh, no,
he was still a high school guy, and he was playing quarterback and defensive back. He was several pounds, he was like 40 pounds lighter probably at that point when he was.
Sorry, that was not a pro day. O standard for other, so it must have come.
Get your stuff right. Get your story right. Come on.
I'd say he's probably a 4.7 guy now.
I'll stick with 4.8. We'll find out. Well, we got about 5 months till Notre Dame's pro day comes around.
About.
Yeah. Well, the defensive line, the interior especially, is going to look a little bit different this week because Howard Cross is going to be out after injuring that left ankle last week. And so you kind of look at things. No Cross. We will see more of Gabriel Rubio. As of right now, Donovan Heinisch is at the top of the depth chart, and Rubio is behind him. And the question came up today about seeing more of Rubio at that defensive tackle or / nose guard position.
Yeah, we're not going to move him out to the Viper end position, but you'll see Donnie Heinisch in there, as you've seen the past couple of weeks, but you'll also see more of Gabe Rubio. Gabe can play 3 tech or nose. He can play both of our tackles position. And you can see Sean Sevillano and Armel Mukum. And so all of 5 of those guys, including Riley, have had a great week of practice in terms of the preparation for this game. And, there's a chance you can see all 5 of them.
Do you have any concern for the interior defensive line without Cross?
No, and I think the biggest reason I feel comfortable is Gabe Rubio being back. I think he provides a ton of depth at that position. And like Marcus Freeman said, his flexibility between the 3 tech and the nose will also, I think, prove to be important. But the other kind of reason that I'm not too concerned is what sign do I have to be concerned defensively about the depth at you name it position. It feels like they've had kind of some issues, obviously, at Viper defensive end in terms of injuries. The secondary has had some injuries, and it's just been next man up. They keep going. And to me, that's the most impressive trait of this Marcus Freeman tenure in year 3 is we are now seeing quality depth at every position. It's not just your 1 and 2s. You have confidence in your 3s and 4s as well. And what's going to get them ready is a good week of practice. And that sounds like, what's been going on this week. So I'm excited to see maybe some of those younger guys, Mukum, Seviano, stepping up and getting an opportunity, at home against a lesser opponent. I'm not going to say a bad opponent, but a lesser opponent. And I think that also helps too when you're playing a lesser opponent.
Yeah, I mean, should at least be a better opponent than the one that we saw last week, but something very similar is a lot of sacks allowed. Anthony Calandria, the Virginia quarterback, has been sacked 30 times this season. 30 times.
That's about 3 per game.
Yeah.
3 or 4 a game.
It's very, very similar to Florida State last week. And so, I think that especially like the way Donovan Heinisch played last week, maybe the best game that he's ever had. And Rubio, with that big body that he's got, I think they'll be just fine this week. I think that Joe said going to need him for Army. I think that's the bigger thing is getting him back for Army next week. Much more important next week. But even then, again, like you get that big body Rubio, I think they'll be fine. I don't like if I was going scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably put it at a 2 or a 3. Like Howard Cross is very good, but going up against who they're going up against this week, not a vital concern by any means. Little update on Benjamin Morrison, who of course has been out. It's already been about a month now since he had his hip surgery.
Well, he's doing well. He's recovering. He's walking without his brace. He's coaching. He's become a coach for us for that corners room, and he's really working hard at just rehabbing. And we had our captain's meeting on Monday. His mind's in a great spot in terms of where he is physically and mentally, but I don't know if he's on track or ahead of schedule, but he's really, really doing a good job in terms of, trying to work his way back to recovery and where he can run and start doing some football things.
That's interesting. Just kind of hearing that last couple of sentences there, Jess, being able to do some football things and getting, whether he's on track or ahead of schedule, it sounds like things are going very well in terms of recovery. Does it give you any more reason to believe that he's going to be healthy enough to declare for the draft when you hear that from Marcus Freeman?
I think honestly, that's what they're, working towards. That's the end goal is getting prepared for the NFL draft. And I think that's ultimately what made, the final decision and trying to establish a timetable for when he can, realistically get back. So, I do think it makes me feel better about his declaration for the draft. And I do think when you're not asked about when he can start doing X, Y, and Z, and you voluntarily say, he's going to start getting into X, Y, and Z, I think it kind of shows that there is going to, this isn't going to be a further issue, right? Like this isn't a lingering issue and he's going to be ready for, like you were saying, he's not going to say it because that's Benjamin Morrison's, choice and decision and announcement to make of when he wants to and if he's going to declare for the draft. But ultimately, that's, what they're working towards.
Yeah. And, like Jeremy is and Tom are kind of saying, hopefully he comes back. Guess it'll be how he grades out. I mean, he'll get his draft evaluation, but that's based on who he was as a healthy player. The question is going to be now, he's not going to get a grade in terms of how healthy is the hip. Like you don't start doing the physicals and all that kind of stuff for the NFL teams until you actually go to the combine. And if you go to the combine, that means you have entered your name in the draft. So it's just kind of a dicey situation for Morrison in terms of the decision that he's got to make. But only he's going to know just how healthy that thing is, and how healthy he thinks he is in terms of being able to go forward.
I mean, yeah, like selfish reasons, you do want him to come back, but
absolutely,
you gotta, this guy's been getting first round grades ever since his freshman season. So, it's his time. If he can prove, obviously that's got to be the biggest concern right now, right? In his evaluation is now you've kind of had multiple injuries throughout the college career. Can he stay healthy? And what does he need to do to, continue to stay healthy, essentially? I think it more becomes injury prevention type talks. Does he need to change, how he goes about his off-season conditioning and strength training, etc.?
So we've seen a better looking team on Saturdays for the last several weeks. What are they doing early in the week? What are they doing Tuesday and Wednesday to get to that point?
Myself, so many people want to know, like, what's the one thing? And the reality is there's not just one thing. It's the consistency in doing what you've been asked to do, right? What your task is. And it's a mindset mentality. It's never perfect. I told him yesterday, I want a perfect Tuesday and a perfect Wednesday. That's what I want. That's what we want. But it's never going to be perfect. But can we really focus on staying in the moment, like on this play, on this rep, being intentional? The plans are the plans. Like, they change very slightly each week. There's nothing I've done in terms of the plans that has contributed, I believe, to the success. I think it's just the intentionality of the way you work, right? Your routines are usually the same, right? Your routine, what you do every week is the same, but your intentionality of doing those routines have to continue to improve. And so if we have a 15-period practice on Tuesday, every Tuesday, right, can we make sure that the way we focus and our intentions during that one period of practice is better than it was the week before? And it's that constant reminder. It's that constant mindset. There's the natural improvement that happens over time, right? Through experience, there's natural improvement. But, can we continue to improve faster by really making sure we're intentional with how we're practicing, how we're focusing, the meetings that we have, the understanding of what's expected? All those things contribute to the constant improvement, I believe.
Okay. So that was roughly 90 seconds there, Jesse. What did you hear?
I didn't really hear a direct answer.
I didn't either.
But
the closest I can decipher is like work smarter, not harder, I guess. That's kind of the message that it seemed like. I don't know.
To me, it felt like the consistency of just giving your 100% at practice every day. I think when you get into a mindset of not practicing hard or working hard every day, that can lead into, feeling like you don't have to give 100% in the game, or feeling like you can flip the switch in the game. But if it's something you haven't practiced all week, you can't just flip that switch. And so it's the consistency that Marcus Freeman is asking for, of coming out and giving your top performance every Tuesday and Wednesday. But I mean, if Marcus Freeman could bottle up what it takes to give your best performance every Saturday as a result of what's being done Tuesday and Wednesday, he would, and he would sell it and be the richest guy in the country because he could sell it to every coach, right? So I think that's the constant battle, and I think that's something that Marcus Freeman has alluded to in the past of what keeps him up at night is, avoiding those letdowns. How do I make sure that, regardless of win or loss, we are still putting our best effort and giving our best, playing our best every Saturday, right? I think that's what it comes down to.
Like Michael said, there was some salad in there. Like Joe said, some coach speak in there. I mean, that's kind of
that's who he is, though.
Comes down to. No, I mean, that's absolutely it. I mean, that's what it is. Yeah, but like you said, if he could figure that out, if he had some secret formula, then everybody would be beating down his door trying to find out the secret recipe, right? The 11 herbs and spices or whatever.
Right.
Because like everybody wants it. Only one team finishes as the national champion every year. So they're all trying to figure it out, I think, as they go along. But, again, the team has looked better over the course of the last month or so. Well, I mean, more than just a month, I guess. It's been trending upward ever since week 3. So outside of opening drives, Al Golden's defense has pretty much dominated this season. Golden said this week that it's kind of about getting the opposing offense off script. That's what you have to get them off their script, because everyone's got their script when they start the game. So Freeman talked a little bit about how you do that.
I think more than anything, what you don't want to do is make something up that you haven't seen, right? And so you have to have a good plan defensively that really, in that first drive, can answer anything you see on offense. Some teams have done a good job on that first series and done some things we haven't saw. But the thing is, how do you respond? How do you get those adjustments defensively, and how do you make sure you have a good plan? So we got a good plan going in. We're going to have to adapt and adjust. It's just a game of football based off what their plan is and what their plan of attack is. But there's not one thing that we could say, hey, if we do this in the first drive, we know we're going to stop them, right? If we knew that, then we would call it every single time. But we got to make sure we have a good base plan that can settle our guys down no matter what formations you see offensively.
I don't know. Kind of seems easier said than done, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Freeman, and he's correct when for what he's alluding to in this response is, all we can do is play our base defense and adapt our base defense based off of what Virginia or, X opponent is doing.
Whoever the opponent is, yeah.
But also what he's getting at is when you're Notre Dame and these teams are coming in as underdogs and you're a top 10 team in the country, and they know you have a top 10 defense in the country, you can't just do the same stuff that you've been showing on film every week. And
they're going to try to throw some stuff at you. Yeah.
Unfortunately for Notre Dame, and this is why it works for other teams, is when they script out that first series, they're going to do stuff that is outside of their base offense. Trick plays, maybe some little things here and there. But you can't, as an offense, do that the entire game.
Right.
It's just not going to work the entire game. And so these teams get out on Notre Dame early, or their defense early, because they're just basically running stuff that Notre Dame hasn't practiced all week, right? And so what Marcus Freeman is saying is, even if we haven't practiced it, our base defense needs to be sound enough to react to whatever is given in front of us. And so, what happens is they get off during that first series. Defensive guys will come over to their position groups and D coordinators and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what we practice. They'll draw up how they're going to cover it, and then it's fixed the rest of the game. And that's ultimately what you see out of the Notre Dame defense is they just fix, they adjust their defense to what's being shown. And then, when that team reverts back to their base offense and Notre Dame's defense has already practiced that the whole week, it's really just stagnant football after that.
Yeah, and these teams, pretty much every team comes in. They've got their script. It's like their 14 plays or whatever it is. And those are the plays that you're practicing the most during the week, the ones that you're repping out the most during the week, probably after they've pared things down a little bit, figuring out what works the best for them. And then, like you said, you give them a different look on that first series, and then you get off script and you get punched in the mouth, and you get what Notre Dame's defense has given most teams all season long, which is predominant goose eggs for the rest of the game. That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, that's just the way that it's worked out. So, I mean, that's pretty much what it is. I don't know. There's not too much more to go on that. Sly Fox, apparently you said something. You let the cat out of the bag about getting married in October next year. I saw somebody on the YouTube page make a comment about
I was getting a lot of heat for this one, and luckily, Vince was also giving me heat for it because it's the Boise State game next season. But it is. It's funny. I've had this conversation, and I won't go too crazy into it, but if you can't give up football for one day, I think you're the problem.
Oh, zing. Coming in hot.
It's one day, if you're saying that football comes before someone that has been an influential part of your life for 30 years, then, that's on you. Like, record the game. I don't know. It's not that detrimental.
Sly Fox says you're whipped. I mean,
I picked it. I had no issue with sacrificing a Saturday, especially in the fall, because didn't want to get married in the late winter, be way too cold. Didn't want to do it in the dead heat of the summer, be way too hot. I'm already a person that runs hot and sweaty as is. And so the fall is the perfect combination of nice weather, low temperatures. It'd be beautiful outside. So,
and the one thing I'll say, because I'll just say there were other dates they were trying to get in September. I know, and I don't know if there were bye weeks then. I have no idea. I'm not planning this wedding. I'm not paying for this. You know what I'm saying? People can come at you all they want, but until they're the ones shelling out the cash for the venue and, everything else that comes.
It was the venue specifically wanted. Dates were starting to go very quickly.
That's right. These, it's amazing just kind of like what knowledge I did have of you guys trying to get this planned and booked and everything else, how quickly these venues go, and just the price that you pay for some of these venues and just availabilities more than a year out, all that different kind of stuff. So you do what you got to do, man. That's what it comes down to, and look, everyone's giving you a hard time because of the fact that you're doing this in October. And your mom's anniversary date, obviously August 7th. And when we were getting married on August 7th, I never thought about the fact that less than 10 years down the road, that comes right at the start of Notre Dame training camp, that's, that's always going to be a part of it, so there's always something. It's one time. The rest of your life, you don't have to worry about it.
So. There's just so many Saturdays I've watched college football in my life, and I'm okay with sitting one of them out,
John says you get married during the bye week. Well, you don't if you want the venue, and the venue is booked during the bye week, John. That's again, sorry.
I got some heat during mailbag yesterday.
Yeah, Matt says I'll record the game for you. Yeah, well, I'll record it, but
we'll be watching it together probably.
That's right. How is she going to feel about that when everyone's gathered around the TV watching the Notre Dame football game in the middle of the ceremony or the reception or whatever it is? How's that going to go over?
I don't think there's any TVs on property, so.
Okay. All right. Let's do some we in, we out. What do you think?
Oh, this is my second favorite segment of the week behind whiteboard.
All right. Here we go. I'll try to get you off the hook with all this wedding stuff since you buried yourself yesterday. 36 counter deuce. Coach Golden and Coach Mickens are both on Notre Dame staff for the 25 season. In or out on that?
I'll be in on that one, but I think 2025 will be the last time.
Yeah, I'm in on it as well. I think that this is you're getting to the point, as Mike Mickens has become, from both a recruiting and a developmental standpoint, he's become one of the best, college assistant coaches in the nation. And, I don't think that there's any argument against that. They've given him some title in those kind of things to keep him around. It's going to get a little bit harder every year. And I think at some point you're not going to be able to keep the whole band together, but
that's what you want as a coach. You want
No, you do, but he's a very vital, as great as Al Golden is at what he does, what Mike Mickens has, because when you look at the continuity, there's been obviously a lot more turnover on the offensive side of the ball, and they've been very fortunate with the continuity that they've had on the defensive side of the ball, specifically with these two guys, and then, Bulla was kind of spawned out of that when they added him to help out Al Golden last year. But so I agree. They'll keep him for one more year. I think it's going to be really tough to keep him beyond one more season, though. Unless Al Golden decides he's going to move on and then Mickens becomes the defensive coordinator. And
that was a question we talked about yesterday. Do we see Al Golden moving on?
What did you guys think?
I said no. I think he's kind of found his happy medium. I don't think he desires to be a college head coach. I think he's had his shot at that, and I think he went to the NFL to kind of refine his craft, and now he gets to run the whole shebang as a defensive coordinator at the college level, and he runs a very high level defense as well. So I think he's just kind of, to me, he's going to stick to his lane. I think he's had that opportunity, and it just didn't go quite the way he wanted to.
I think so as well.
He's older now too. I think when you're a head coach, that's something you want to do younger because less travel, less recruiting. Don't get me wrong. He still has to do those things, but it's just not nearly as intense as what Marcus Freeman has to do.
And there's just a lot more that comes with being the figurehead of the program than there is for being a defensive coordinator, albeit an elite defensive coordinator. But he's talked about the fact, and like this season, it's come up. Like he didn't just come back to coaching college. The words he used were, "I came back to Notre Dame." So like that was a big part of it. Just like with Mike Denbrock, like the Notre Dame aspect of it is a huge part of it. It's not just being in college or, whatever, like it, that's all part of it. So I agree. DK, we in, we out. After watching Notre Dame come out rusty from a bye, the top 4 seeds will experience this after sitting for 3+ weeks and going up against teams that played the week prior. And of course, he's talking about college football playoff here.
Yeah. I'll say, I don't know, this is hard because it's like you're talking about all 4 of the teams. I think there'll be some rustiness for sure. I think you're also getting down to the end of the season and teams are kind of now realizing, what's more or less at stake. For a team like, for example, Ohio State, what's at stake for them is they got to continue to be undefeated and go on to the Big Ten championship, potentially win that and get a top 4 seed, right? Like that's their end goal. I think they're playing Northwestern this week. Northwestern is a team that's probably still fighting for bowl eligibility. And their season is like intensified now because of what's at stake by potentially knocking off a team or upsetting a team like Ohio State. So, I guess what I'm saying is motive has kind of shifted at this point of the season. And I think teams now have a realistic understanding of who they are and what they're going after. And I think that oftentimes provides more support for the underdog. So for that reason, I'll just go in. I think these games are naturally going to get closer as the season winds down.
I do think that there's something to be said for getting a little momentum based off playing in that first round. It's going to be really interesting to see these first couple playoffs. Like, how much does that matter? Because what typically happens during a bowl game, the layoff that you have now, both teams have just about the same kind of layoff, unless you played in a conference championship game, of course, like when we're talking about the past. So it's like you're 1 week closer, basically. But typically, like you show up in those bowls and teams are completely different. Now, in these last few years, obviously the transfer portal has impacted that and opt-outs, and all those different kind of things. But you talk about playoffs, and I don't think we're going to see nearly as much of that. But I do think that I do think that extra layoff could be a factor in this. So I'll be at least a little bit in on this, on the teams that play in those first round games, having a little bit of an advantage over those teams with the bye that are having to wait for an extra week.
And I think the part that's tough about the bye is, especially this late in the season, is the mental intensity that comes with, like, you need to be mentally engaged and locked in, right? And so even though physically you might be there, the mental aspect of not competing in a game for a week is you mentally might not be as in tune as you should be. And I think that's where the biggest letdown comes is, oh, we just off a bye, we're playing a bad Northwestern team. Like, that's the part where it's hard to stay locked in.
Okay, Fish ND. I'm not sure who Fish ND is, but don't forget, this is we in, we out, not buy, sell, hold. But that's okay. So he asked a recruiting class question. Will Notre Dame finish as a top 8
I'd say out.
I think I'm probably out on that because look, you lost the jewel of the class. You lost the quarterback, and I mean that.
So I
that
heard
weighed heavily. So
I don't want to go too deep in this rabbit hole, but I heard he's now taking another visit to Ole Miss.
like beyond just the one that he just had, like he's visiting again, is what you're saying?
Oh, sorry, I saw that he recently. I think it was this past week.
He was celebrating out there on the field when they beat Georgia last week.
Again, I know these kids are young, but you do you, buddy.
Canada's a blessing. Canada's a blessing if you're a Notre Dame fan. It's somebody else's headache now, just like with Peyton Bowen and
I don't think he's gonna. I think I was more afraid about Ole Miss when the whole thing started because of Lane Kiffin. That's where he's from. The style of offense that Lane Kiffin runs, the talent that they have at Ole Miss, the NIL that they have at Ole Miss. I think that's where he's going to end up. I truthfully never thought Auburn was real, and I think Auburn being really bad this season also plays into it. And that's
that also gives him. But that also gives him a chance to play quicker. The fact that Auburn is bad, But the other part of that is, is Hugh Freeze. Like how long is he going to be around and all that kind of stuff. So another one from Fish ND. We in and we out. We'll see Denbrock employ more 21 personnel the last 3 games of the regular season. Then he follows that up with we see Denbrock employ more 21 personnel in the playoffs. So do you think we see more 21 in either of these instances, last 3 games of the regular season or in the playoffs?
I'm going to be a real annoying guy here. I'm going to take the middle option here. I think it's like USC playoff, maybe like the last 2 games. My 3-game stretch would be second to last game. I can't remember who that is. I don't know if it's Army. It'd be Army.
There's
USC,
only 3 games left: Virginia, Army, and USC. So.
It would be Army, USC playoffs. But I do believe. Here's my rationale. I don't think you want to show that early if you don't have to. I think that's something you ultimately kind of want to save as not a surprise for the playoff, but again, you don't want to put a lot of film on it out there because then teams have some sort of – they'll practice it, They'll have a base defense based off if Notre Dame comes out in 21 personnel. And so my thought process is hopefully it's something they've been practicing throughout the season but really haven't pulled it out yet. And so for that reason, I think it's a USC kind of playoff situation.
Look, I'm with DJ. I'm out. Michael is saying in. Look, I'd like to be in. I think we'd all like to be seeing more 21, but – how many years in a row have we said that at this point? It's like, this is not a new thing. And we keep, it's like every year it's like, oh, are we going to see more 21 personnel? Oh, we saw a little bit of 20 or 21. It's like, oh, we're going to see more. No, we don't see any more of it. So like as great as it would be, I don't think that we're going to.
Well, it's so funny because
I'm going to be out, because I could buy the concept of, okay, now you're going into the playoff kind of along the lines of what we were talking about earlier with the opening script and that kind of stuff. You're going to show something that is off tendency, those kind of things. It would make perfect sense, but it is a new offensive coordinator, so there is a different philosophy in place here. So maybe you see, it just feels like you're going to go with your strength. Like you're not just going to come out and, run a bunch of, like, would you consider this? You wouldn't call it trick plays, but at the same time, it's like you're not going to recreate your offense, it doesn't feel like, for your biggest games of the season, right?
Right. And to me, it's like the funny part is even when they did go 21 personnel this season, it was like Aeneas Williams and Devin Ford. It's like, give us 2 backs with Love and Price, like don't even waste my time with 2 backs unless it's freaking.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I definitely think it's something they've practiced. It's just a matter of when they want to pull it out. But if you are finding the time to do it, I don't think you need to in these last 3 games. I would wait more so for the playoffs.
Right. I just don't like D-Troll Hunter. Only fans can dream that a coach is just holding stuff back. And I just don't think – I think that if they felt like it was going to give them an advantage they'd be using it right now, even though maybe they don't need to. And, kind of when you look at Riley Leonard, he's obviously a quarterback, and I'm not saying he's a running back playing quarterback, but he is leading the team in rushing. So in a sense, just in terms of the options that having him on the field give you, it is almost like having another running back out there. It's just that, again, like having 21, gives you the ability to, to move those running backs around and present different challenges for the defense.
Well, it's like the play I whiteboarded the other day. It's two back, but you can still run you could still run a nice RPO play out of it. It's the modern triple option. You can fake it to a running back. You can swing it out to a running back in a pass play, or quarterback can keep it and run some sort of QB counter or power. So there's 3 built-in plays that come off of when you have a quarterback who can run and you have 2 backs in the backfield. So,
and the fact that Jeremiah Love is a pretty good receiver as well. But even that, we haven't seen as much of that this year as I thought we were going to. Okay, Salty, always a very well thought out question from Mr. Salty, but he wrote a book again. So here we go. Now that Riley Leonard has discovered Mitchell Evans is back to full health and up to his old tricks, and that the great one can take you to the end zone single-handedly, if Mr. Leonard continues to throw to him, 2 catches for 30 yards on a 36-yard drive and 2 catches plus a PI for 45 yards on a 65-yard drive, both ending in touchdowns, Mr. Leonard will continue to throw to them. The added offense will present additional complexity for opposing defenses, elevating the offense to championship grade. So basically, I want to go back to basically he's saying Mitchell Evans and Jaden Greathouse will be more prominent in the offense going forward.
Yeah, I think the question is, the more you mix in Mitchell Evans and Jaden Greathouse, does it elevate your offense to a level that is national championship worthy? And my answer is simply yeah, but that's kind of what we've been saying the whole season is we know what they can do. Riley Leonard can do as a runner. We know what he can do maybe in some of the quick pass game. But the more you can work Mitchell Evans up the seam, and he can sit down in those zones, those holes in the zones, and then, Greathouse can extend the field and stretch it and get more of those big chunk plays, then yeah, it's just another thing that these defenses have to worry about on top of the 3-headed monster that they have in the backfield. So yeah, that's to me, if Notre Dame figures out a passing attack beyond 10 yards, that 10 to 20 yard range, I will confidently tell you, I don't think that anyone stacks up with them in all phases of the game. Look,
and this has been there all year. It's really the evolution of Riley Leonard. Like he said a few weeks back after the game, it's like, those guys have been open. I just haven't thrown to them. Remember, he said that, so like, we're not making it up. Like, he knows that there are more throws out there for him, to be able to hit. He just hasn't always seen it in the game. And I think that's just it. Again, I'm not going to expect things to just all of a sudden morph overnight, but we are seeing more of this sprinkled in. It's there. And if they can capitalize that, if he can capitalize on that, there's no doubt that it'll continue to turn this offense into a championship caliber offense. Domer Grizz, the senior day ceremony is cool because it's fun to cheer for the seniors individually and they have a nice moment, but in a way, it's also anticlimactic because they don't actually get to run out of the tunnel one last time together with their teammates. In or out on that. So does senior day take away from the whole experience because the seniors are running out there on their own and not with their teammates one last time?
No, I would say out, because you get to make that last run by yourself. You get to kind of embrace
all the cheers are for you.
Yeah, all the cheers are for you. You get to embrace that moment, by yourself and make it, what it is or isn't personally for you. And you run down a tunnel of, all your fellow seniors and their family members. And at the end is, Coach Freeman waiting for you. So, I love the senior day celebration stuff. I think it's really cool. I think it's more impactful because that you get your own moment. It's not everyone cheering for Notre Dame as a team. They're cheering for you as the individual and the time and effort that you've put in throughout your years at Notre Dame.
Yeah. I guess kind of what I wonder about like how much does this stuff, like the fact that these guys are coming out there and there's this big swell of emotion, because how many not every senior day, how many times have we seen the slow starts on senior day, I guess is what I'm saying, because guys get caught up in some of that emotion. Is there some negative impact from any of that?
Yeah, but I don't know how you would counteract it without giving the respect that's due to the players. Like, I get it stinks and you don't want to come out flat because of the emotion, but you still these players still, I think, have earned and deserve the respect that's and the recognition that's given to them.
And the other thing is, like, to this whole running out the tunnel with your teammates and all that kind of stuff, like Jeremy is saying, hosting a playoff game, and whether or not they host a playoff game, they still have at least two other, like, they'll still get to run out of the tunnel with their teammates. It just won't be at Notre Dame Stadium, one will be at Yankee Stadium and the other will be at the Coliseum. And then, whatever happens after that happens after that. So there'll be other opportunities to run out of the tunnel with their teammates. It just might be the last time it happens at Notre Dame Stadium.
I hope the seniors bring their marshmallows.
They always do. Hesburgh Mafia. Notre Dame needs to win a championship before they start getting the respect they truly deserve from all the media outlets. So do you think they'll actually get the respect if they win a national championship?
Oh, I think that if they win a national championship, but I think they can do it by beating an SEC team in the first round of the playoffs this season. I think they need to I think Notre Dame's biggest issue is they get to the dance and they fall flat on their face during the dance, whether that's the BCS national championship, whether that's when they made the playoffs twice during the 4-team format, whether that was, their New Year's 6 bowl games in the past couple decades. They have to just win against a meaningful opponent on the national stage. I don't think that means you got to win a national championship, but I think you just got to show progress. And that's really the big thing is, can they show progress?
And that's what you're going to hear. Assuming Notre Dame makes the playoffs, in the lead up to these playoff games, you're going to hear, well, Notre Dame hasn't won a major bowl game since 1993. You're going to hear some of that. You got to win one of those games. That's what it's going to take. At the very least, you've got to win a first round playoff game, and then you've got to be competitive in every game that comes after that. That's ultimately what's going to bring the respect, because not only has Notre Dame not won those major bowl games in recent years, what's happened by and large? They've lost by relatively lopsided margins, right? Like, that's what's going to take. Just got to start winning some of those games, and at a very minimum, be much more competitive than what they've been in the past.
The chat wants you to skip this next one.
Notre Dame will lose both Mike Mickens and running back coach Deala McCullough this offseason.
I'll be out.
I'm out as well. But again, like, these two guys, in terms of assistants, look at both of these rooms, the cornerback room and the running back room, and look at how they're recruited differently since those guys have been here. Look at how they've been developed differently since those guys have been here. Like, they're both going to be sought after. I think
you're taking the bait right now.
Taking the bait on what?
I just left it at no. I think I'm not disagreeing with anything you say, but I don't want to speak it into.
You just don't want to talk about it? Okay. You don't want to put it out there in the universe? Gotcha.
No, but everything you said, like, Notre Dame corners and running backs have been some of the best turnaround position group wise at Notre Dame over the last 5 to 6 seasons. And it's squarely because of those guys. They'll get calls, they'll get offers. It's just a matter of, is it the offer big enough and great enough for what they want to do right now?
Last one from Hesburgh Mafia. Ohio State gets left out of the playoffs if they lose again.
This is a big conversation between Vince and I yesterday as well. If Ohio State loses to IU, what would happen. I think that they would just flip-flop where they are spot-wise. I don't think that Ohio State would drop drastically far.
Yeah, I could see that, they would have 2 losses at that point. So I could see Ohio State falling into the, kind of where
8,
Notre
9
Dame is
range.
right now, 7, 8, 9 range.
Correct.
Yeah. I don't think they get left out though, because, look, you've got more teams right now as you get to number 10 where Alabama and, 11 where Ole Miss is, and then Georgia at 12 right behind him. Those are all 2-loss teams at this point. So I don't think Ohio State's going to fall out because those teams at the tail end of the top 12 are all going to have 2 losses. So I don't think Ohio State falls out. I still think they'll make it. They're just going to be a lower seeded team, obviously. Joe Allen, Virginia's quarterback, has a noodle arm and tends to throw a few interceptions from time to time. In or out on the over bet if it was set for 2.5 for Notre Dame's total number of interceptions this weekend.
Forgive me, what did they do against Florida State? 2?
Are you talking about Virginia?
Notre Dame last week against Florida State.
Oh, what did the number end up being?
Let me look. I know Tolich.
Give me a second. Give me a second. I'll find it here. I'm trying to remember. No, it was 2 interceptions. Yeah.
But they also had the special teams kind of turnovers.
I'm gonna go under. The guy's thrown 8 interceptions. I think he's good for at least 1, if not 2, but I'm not gonna go as far as 3. So I'll go under. So I'm out on that.
I'm gonna go under as well. 3 is a big number.
Yeah, I do like the noodle arm, though.
Only Jared Goff throws more than 2 interceptions.
If anything, I think probably 2 interceptions and maybe a strip sack because of all the sack. Again, like the fact that he's been sacked 3 times per game. I think there's a high chance of a strip sack being mixed in there.
I need to know the last time a quarterback threw 5 interceptions and his team still won a game.
In a college game? We're not talking about an NFL game?
Both. I mean, come on. I'm just mad because that idiot lost me my fantasy game because he threw 5 interceptions. Minus 10 points, and I lose by 3.
This is what you get for including negative points in your fantasy league scoring. So you deserve it.
As the commissioner?
Mm-hmm. Irish for Life 99. Michigan will become the first team in history not to qualify for a bowl game following a national championship season, not counting LSU since it was a COVID year, he says.
I haven't seen who's left on Michigan's schedule. I know Ohio State is there. I don't know how. Are they at 5 wins right now? Are they 5-5? Are they 4-5? I'll go in on this.
They are 5-5 right now, and they have Northwestern and Ohio State to close out the season.
I have to go out. They'll lose to Ohio State and they'll beat Northwestern, but I picked them to go 8-4 at the beginning of the season. And I said it was going to be a struggle to even get to 8, and I'm glad that I was wrong on that one. They're going to be lucky to get to 6-6.
I don't know if I picked 8-4. Didn't we both on?
We did. We did the schedule.
Was 9.5?
It was 8.5 was the line.
Was it 8.5? And we both thought that they were good for at least 3, if not 4 losses. I do remember that. I'm out as well. I think they'll split them. I think they'll split these last 2 games. They'll be a 500 team, and they'll end up in, whatever. Probably won't even be good enough to be in the Duke's Mayo Bowl for that matter, but they'll be in ReliaQuest or I don't even know.
They'll play a MAC team is what they'll play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they'll be in a bowl, so I've got to be
Michigan
out.
Versus Toledo.
Oh, man. Ballpeen Shillelagh, the offensive line continues to quietly grow these last few games of the season until we realize they aren't really making any major mistakes and have become quite consistent. Are we in or are we out on that?
I'll be in on that, and I'll be in on it because they're a Joe Moore finalist. So obviously they're doing something right in terms of consistency. I mean, you have to remember that this line was, hodgepodge together at the beginning of the season after 2 unexpected injuries. And then during the season, they had some injuries, and now they've kind of, gotten some people back. So I admire the relentlessness and the ability to get the job done for the given game. It hasn't been perfect, but they've done enough to be efficient and be a top 10 defense. So I love it.
Did you feed your cat tonight?
I did.
Okay. I don't know what's going on then. I'll be in on it as well. I think that as they've actually been able to play together and get some experience, that has helped greatly. And getting Billy Schrouth back on the, at left guard has helped him quite a bit as well. So, and I think it's helped Anthony Knapp. Anthony Knapp has played better these last couple of games since Schrouth has been in there. And I don't think that that's a coincidence either. So I'm totally in. This is a recruiting question. So sorry, but we'll be able to answer that. Another one from Joe. In or out, Notre Dame will outscore their next three opponents 110-40. Before you answer that, someone did the math for us. Your numbers equate to an average score of 37-13.
I'll be in on that, and I think that 110 is going to be higher, and that 40 might be even a little bit lower.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're going right on the nose on these numbers, 110-40, I'll be out because I agree. Like if the average score is 37-13, I think they're probably going to put up 40 plus points in all three of these games.
I think the number should be 120-30, which would be an average score of 40-10.
That's kind of the ballpark that I was thinking of, right in that area. So I think it's going to be even more lopsided. Again, like Fish.
Army's the only game I worry about.
Like Army, he's got Notre Dame winning 31-27. I don't think it's going to be that close, and I don't think Army is going to score that many points. Army is the better team than Navy. But when you look at who they've played in comparison to Navy, it is very similar. But the level of competition is really no different that Army has played compared to what Navy played. And you saw how things worked out against Navy.
I just don't think Army will turn it over as much.
No. And that'll be the thing that will at least keep it a little bit closer, but I still think Notre Dame's going to score.
You just won't allow Notre Dame to run it up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is Army possessing the ball. Will they be able to possess the ball? But, like we talked about before Navy, you played against the option multiple times in the same season before. Like, did you feel more confident going up against it the second time compared to the first time?
Yeah, I did. But unfortunately, I felt like the advantage that Notre Dame has is they're playing a different school. I was playing the same high school. I felt like the same high school had the upper hand because it's not I felt good about it, but I didn't feel good about the entirety of my defense. I felt like the offense I felt personally good and had the advantage, but I felt as a whole, the offense had an advantage because that was like the second or third time we were playing that team in the same season. But luckily for Notre Dame, it's a different opponent, but similar foundation of scheme.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying, USMA 87. He says Army has 2 fumbles all season. Remember, Navy had 0 all season.
Yeah, and then they got pressure in space by athletes and started to fumble everywhere.
Right. Again, I think it'll be a cleaner game from Army's perspective compared to Navy, but just what you said, like there's going to be a big difference in the kind of athletes that Army is going to face when they face Notre Dame, just like with Navy. We got next week to talk about that one, though. From DJ, we in or we out? Since each week brings chaos to college football playoff, this week's chaos will be provided by Kansas and then San Jose State.
Give me a quick second. I'm just going to look at the top 25 matchups, scoreboard, and see.
Kansas is playing BYU.
I knew that, and I know the spread is 2.5.
Yeah.
I fear Utah against Colorado. It's a noon game, and I think Utah's got a lot of bad blood on there that they taste right now after that BYU game. Really outside of that, there's not really any good.
San Jose State's playing
matchup.
Boise State. Like, do you believe in San Jose State?
I think they've been relatively good. They're 6-3, 3-2 in the Mountain West, but I don't think they're going to upset Boise. I think Boise has too much at stake. So I'm going to go. I think Kansas and Utah are on the top teams that'll provide chaos this week.
So you're saying Kansas and Utah. DJ saying Utah has no offense, but they took, granted it was a rivalry game. They did take BYU right to the end, but I'm out on San Jose State though. I don't think that they'll give Boise State near enough. I'll be in on Kansas. Fingers crossed, but I'm going to be out on San Jose State. Berkshire Yank. The coaching carousel that occurs after the final game will have a major impact on college football playoff teams. In or out on that?
I'll be out on that.
I'm going to be out as well. Especially like head coaching. Now, I don't know how any of that will be handled with the staff. I'm sure that, staff will be, assistants will be able to interview and that kind of thing, again, because so many more teams are going to be involved in the playoffs and you are going to have turnover and stuff like that. This will be the first time that we kind of go through that. I'm going to hesitantly be out on it though, because I think that for the most part, the playoff teams are going to be pretty locked in and focused on winning playoff games. I've got a couple more here. Let me see. I got to get over here. Oops. From DK, we in and we out. The white snowmobile suit the great one was wearing on Saturday makes him look soft. In or out?
In. You never show any sign of being cold.
I'm going to be out. I thought it looked kind of cool, actually.
It looks sweet, but it screams soft.
I don't know about soft.
Well,
like Aeneas Williams was wearing, he wears the, the hoodie coming out of the back too, doesn't he?
Yeah, but Aeneas Williams will run someone over. Jaden Greathouse isn't running someone over.
I think he could run someone over.
He'd make a business decision.
I mean, everyone's making business decisions, right? You made a business decision and everybody gave you a hard time about it.
You couldn't wait for this one.
Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready to be rapidly fired.
Okay, so you left Riley Leonard out of your ranking of your top 5 players on the Notre Dame football roster yesterday. Why do you hate Riley Leonard?
I got bullied into putting Riley Leonard back in my top 5, but now that you
I don't remember hearing that. I don't remember hearing that asked of it. Maybe it was just my partial hearing. I don't know.
But I'm going to keep him still out of my top. Listen, I'm talking about the way I did my analysis was people who are not replaceable, but who's got that best trajectory to the, who is the diamond in their group? You know what I mean? Riley Leonard is a very good player.
You're telling me Riley Leonard's not a diamond in their group?
He's not. He is good, but there are a lot of players who I think could do what Riley Leonard does, is what I'm getting at the end of the day. I don't think he's like the top 5, top 1% of college football quarterbacks. I think that Benjamin Morrison is a top tier 1% corner. I think Xavier Watts is a top tier safety. I think that Howard Cross is a top tier defensive tackle. I think Jeremiah Love is a top tier running back. And I can't remember who my 5th. I think Mitchell Evans was my 5th after that, a healthy Mitchell Evans. So I guess I would like to spin the question back to you, is who would be in your top 5?
Well, I was about to give it to you. I was a little bit shocked that you put Mitchell Evans in there, to be quite honest. Like when you look at now again, okay, if you want to play devil's advocate, part of Mitchell Evans' production, part of it has to do with his health and the fact that he's just finally got past a full year being past having surgery and all that kind of stuff last October. And you do rely on the quarterback getting you the ball. I think Mitchell Evans has been fine. But if I'm going with my top 5 on this team, and now Benjamin Morrison, we're kind of giving, an asterisk, obviously, since he is not playing right now, but he was part of this team. I would still include him in there, but I would go Jeremiah Love. I would go Xavier Watts. I would go Benjamin Morrison. I would go Riley Leonard, and I would go Billy Schrouth. Those would be my top 5.
So I would like to amend mine with Billy Schrouth as well. Vince brought that up yesterday. I would like to I would be comfortable swapping Billy Schrouth for Mitchell Evans, but I will not swap Riley Leonard into my top 5. And let me ask you this. What is more crazy of a thought? Jeremiah Love not being in your top 5 or Riley Leonard not being in your top 5?
Ooh, well, I think it's more crazy to say Jeremiah Love, but like you're talking about top 1%. So you're talking about the whole nation. But I mean, like if you look at who's available on this roster, if you swap Jeremiah Love out for Jadarian Price, you've still got a really good replacement level running back. You're still winning a lot of games with Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams, like if you didn't have Jeremiah Love, right?
Right.
Just for starters. If you took Xavier Watts out, like Adon Schuler is really good. Like Luke Talich showed some nice things last week. Like who knows what the back end of that secondary looks like if you don't have Xavier Watts. So like he's a no-brainer, to have on your list there. Like we talked about what our concern level is with no Howard Cross this week. I still think they're going to be pretty good against Virginia without Howard Cross this week. Maybe if Riley Leonard was not on the field, you'd still be okay against Virginia. Benjamin Morrison, they've, as great as Benjamin Morrison is, they've obviously shown that they can still win some games, over this last month without him. Billy Schrouth, look at the impact. Look how much better the offensive line looks with Billy Schrouth. If you took Riley Leonard out and you're going up against a playoff caliber team without Riley Leonard, what's your confidence then? If you're going from Riley Leonard to Angeli going into a playoff situation, are you feeling pretty confident in that situation?
I would feel you're basically asking me to swap in everyone's backup and tell me how comfortable I would feel. Unfortunately, for me, would not feel good if Steve Angeli is leading me in the playoffs.
I rest my case.
So,
case closed, counselor.
His importance to Notre Dame, yes, but I think I'm straddling that line of also importance to Notre Dame, but also projectability to the NFL level. So that's where I'm getting a little bit caught up. But I'm just
basing it on what helps this team win games. What
and Riley, if that's the circumstance, then yes. And I think that's how the question was posed yesterday. So I would have to, my final list: Benjamin Morrison, Xavier Watts, Billy Schrouth, Riley Leonard, Jeremiah Love.
Okay. We're all in the same boat then. See, so you don't hate Riley Leonard. I'm happy you worked that out. Is there one team ranked ahead of Notre Dame right now this week that you are most convinced the Irish should be ranked ahead of?
Let me just make sure I have all of my rankings in a row. I always see. This was tough because Vince and I were talking about this yesterday. I know they're better than BYU, but BYU is technically undefeated, so I don't have a problem with them being ahead of them.
Right.
Same with IU. I guess for the fun of it, I'll say Penn State, but everyone else I'm cool with.
Just for the fun of it.
I think that they would have their way with Penn State. But I even said this yesterday to Vince. Whoever BYU plays in that first game, they're getting steamrolled by. I don't care.
I don't disagree. Like you said.
But they deserve that spot because they are 9-0.
You can at least justify BYU and Indiana being 1 and 2 spots ahead of Notre Dame because they're undefeated, right? Like you can stomach that.
Even if you don't think they're better, they still deserve that spot.
Yeah, really, when it comes down to it, like Texas only has like one. Like when you're looking at quality wins, Texas compared to Penn State, at least Texas beat Michigan when they were ranked, even though Michigan is a 500 team right now, but at least they were ranked when they were played. But that was largely based off the fact that they won a championship. It was like more based off last year, but like when you look at the actual resumes, like they've both, Texas and Penn State have both lost to ranked teams. And that's kind of what keeps them where they are from a pure who have they beaten standpoint. Neither one of them has really beaten anyone better than, like what Indiana has beaten this year. But like, to me, it is Penn State. Like last week, I was a little bit more, I really don't have a problem with Penn State, but like, why does Penn State keep going up in the rankings? They still haven't beaten anybody else. And they're just getting so much credit for playing a close game against Ohio State. And, like the most they've scored against a Power 4 team, for example, is 35 points against Washington, not a good team. I would see Notre Dame and Penn State playing out somewhat similarly to Notre Dame and Texas A&M. I think that Penn State's defense is good enough, to at least limit Notre Dame to an extent. But from an offensive standpoint, I just don't see the dynamic, explosive type players. I think Notre Dame would make more explosive plays and they would win against Penn State. Like that's how I see it playing out. I just feel like that they're getting way too much credit for losing to Ohio State
in a sloppy game. That game was sloppy,
right? Considering like if Howard doesn't throw the pick six, Will Howard doesn't throw the pick six, and if he doesn't have the fumble like right at the goal line, then it's much closer. Ohio State's much closer to a 27-6 victory than 20-13. Like they're getting credit for keeping the game close, but it was a very sloppy game. So they're getting way too much credit for losing a close game against Ohio State. Andre says, in or out, a good loss versus a bad loss. Is there such a thing?
No, a loss is a loss, no matter if it's by 1 or 30. Unless a team scores on the very last play of the game on some crazy play. So I guess I have to go back on my answer.
I don't know. I do think there is such a thing, a good loss versus a bad loss, because again, Texas lost to Georgia, and I think the committee is seeing that as a good loss. Penn State lost to Ohio State. I think the committee is seeing that because, look at where Notre Dame is ranked versus where those two teams are ranked. Penn State and Texas are both sitting there at 4 and 3. Penn State is 4, Texas is 3. Their losses are to, both of them home losses, by the way, but they are that much higher than Notre Dame. And I think it's all because of who they lost to. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. Those two teams lost to ranked teams. They were all home losses, but those two teams lost to ranked teams at home versus an unranked 500 MAC team now. So I think in the committee's eyes, there is a different, there is a good loss versus a bad loss. I think the way they're looking at it. So even though they might not ever come out and say it, but is there a team that you would want Notre Dame to avoid in the playoffs? Like, is there a team Notre Dame should want to avoid if they're in the playoffs?
Yes. Ole Miss and Ohio State.
Interesting. I feel like didn't we talk about this last week? I feel like if Notre Dame played Ohio State this year,
just not who I want to play round 1.
Oh, sure. Like round 1.
I thought that was like first round of the playoff. Who am I trying to avoid?
Yeah, I can see.
That's kind of how I took it, because I think at some point you're going to play someone good in the playoff, right? Like if you keep winning, but first round, and that's again how I kind of took this question. I would not want to see Ole Miss, and I would not want to see Ohio State, because I think they're going to play a 2-loss SEC team or a 2-loss Ohio State or a 1-loss IU. I think that's and again, that's a broad group, but that's kind of where I think they're standing right now. And of that group, Ole Miss and Ohio State would scare me the most.
Honestly, there's not a team that I would want to avoid. I think they'll all be pretty solid teams in the first round. I know, like you've talked about not wanting to face one of these SEC 2-loss teams or even a 3-loss team in the first round. I just look at it like anyone is beatable, and this whole thing is so wide open. It is. There's so much. I don't think it's total parity, but it's so much closer to parity than there's ever been before. There's not a dominant team this year, so honestly, there's just not a team that I would
What
say
scares me about
avoid that team.
What scares me about Ole Miss is they brought in a really good defensive line in the transfer portal to bulk up for Georgia and to stop to not get manhandled in the trenches by Georgia. And it worked. And that's the bread and butter of Notre Dame's offense, is being able to run the ball and control the line of scrimmage. And so if they were in a stalemate in that battle, I don't know if Notre Dame has enough in the wide receiver game to overcome it. You know what I mean? That's the part I would be scared about.
Yeah.
Especially if it were at Ole Miss for some reason.
But again, I think that Notre Dame's defense, Notre Dame's defense is the X factor and should be able to keep the game close.
It would be close, but would Notre Dame have enough if that run game isn't working to pull out a close one in the end?
Right.
That's what I'm scared of.
And like do the floodgate, and like if the offense is not able, to be effective enough, does a game maybe get out of hand?
And then do they have enough to keep up if they're down, 14 or maybe 17 or something like that?
Right. DJ, I think this is going back to what we were talking about, with the, good loss versus bad loss. DJ says, okay, but they don't look at it correctly. Well, that's your opinion. Obviously, in their opinion, again,
and their opinion is the one that matters.
Yeah, their opinion is the one that matters, whether they look at it correctly or not. And again, like when you look at who the teams are with one, the teams in the top 10 or the top 9 basically with one loss are Ohio State, Texas, Penn State. They've all lost to ranked teams, and they are sitting there at 2, 3, and 4. Then you've got unbeaten Indiana, unbeaten BYU at 5 and 6, a 1-loss Tennessee team. Now, they lost to Arkansas, but they are one spot, ahead of Notre Dame. But again, Arkansas versus Northern Illinois, so again, and then you look at Miami at 9 and 1, and they are one spot behind Notre Dame at number 9. Well, Notre Dame just beat Georgia Tech a couple of weeks ago. Miami just lost to Georgia Tech. So I think that when you look at how things are laid out there, they're definitely differentiating between who did they lose to. That's when you look at the way they've got it ranked, that's exactly how it lays out. It's who they lost to is how they're differentiating those teams. So like whether we like it or not, that's how they're parsing it out. Fill in the blank. Yesterday was college basketball signing day, and it's blank that Micah Shrewsbury signed a nearly consensus top 5 recruiting class that is the highest rated Notre Dame class in the modern recruiting era.
It's absolutely electric. And it's electric for the reason that we've never seen a recruiting class like this. And I think we're going to enter an era of Notre Dame basketball that we haven't seen before as well. I love Mike Bray. I love what he did for the program and, all of that good stuff. But he ran a system and a certain type of, let's control the clock, get a good shot type of offense. I think you're going to see a lot of just playmakers for Notre Dame, guys who can shoot it, guys who can run the floor, guys who just have ultimate athleticism. And again, it's just, there's nothing wrong with it, but this brand of basketball is just going to be different than Bray's, and it's going to be electric in my opinion. It's going to be what the fans want. It's going to be high pace. It's going to be scoring. It's going to be good defense on the back end. And so the more that Shrewsbury, we saw the foundation last season, right? And we're like, man, just think if he had some good players. And now you add this top recruiting class, I think good things are coming, and it's something to be electric about as fans.
And it is just, it's amazing to think that in year 2, Micah Shrewsbury has the second highest rated recruiting class in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Would you have ever thought that Notre Dame would have the number 2 recruiting class in the ACC. I wouldn't have. And I I agree with everything that you just said. Like it's coming. It's coming very soon. And it's amazing that Micah Shrewsbury's been able to do this in a really short amount of time. And that's obviously why they felt so much confidence in a guy like him and going out and getting him from Penn State. So I was just flabbergasted to see this ranking when it came out yesterday. But man, they're going to have some players, and I'm granted, like who they played. They haven't played any world beaters yet, and the schedule is not going to be the easiest schedule this year. But I'm very cautiously optimistic about what they can be this year, just in year two for Micah Shrewsbury. So speaking of recruiting, we're going to flip it to the women's side now, because for the second recruiting cycle in a row, Niele Ivey signed just one player in a class. Last year it was Kate Koval, a post player. This year it's 5-star forward Leah Macy. And so in my pregame interview on the Notre Dame radio network last night, I asked Niele Ivey about being selective and, signing just one player 2 years in a row. And here's what she said.
Have to, fortunately, the transfer portal has been really good to us. But as far as just what we need, I try to replenish the things that we need. And after the season, figure out what that looks like, because that's a big part of recruiting. So being very selective and just trying to make sure I have the right identity, the right fit for our culture.
So I posted the story about, signing Macy on the boards yesterday. And, I think it was Played Like a Champion, who's a really, fervent Notre Dame women's basketball fan. We have a lot of Notre Dame women's basketball fans, both on the boards and in the shows and stuff like that. But like, he was very opposed to only signing the one player because of the fact, like, you're going to lose Maddie Westbeld next year. You're going to lose Sonia Citron for certain next year. There's a good chance you'll lose Olivia Miles next year as well, and so they brought in a post this year. They're bringing in a forward next year. So what do you think, Jess? Do you buy or sell signing just, one player and both of them being front court players 2 cycles in a row?
I buy it, and I buy it because I believe Niele knows more about me than her team and the needs of her team. And I think a good fallback is the transfer portal, and that's something that she mentioned as well. Like if something does happen or an emergent situation, you feel like you need this or that, you can go get a quality proven player in the portal. And I think what Niele Ivey is ultimately getting at, and she didn't say it, but what I took from this is she recruits players who are going to play here at a high level for 3 to 4 seasons. And you don't need an abundance of mouths to feed when they're all the top players in the country, right? You don't need a 5-star sitting on the bench because they're sitting behind a freshman point guard who is going to play all 3 or 4 years here, right? And so there's no reason to be backlogged with 5 years, all these high-end recruits who are going to get mad that they're not playing and eventually leave, right? Like these it's not the men's where you can get drafted after 1 year, and the women's you gotta stick it out, right? And so I think that's a big factor in this thing of when she's looking at it, she's looking at someone who's going to be a high quality player for 3 to 4 seasons, and you don't need multiple of those type of players.
Not only that, but the other side of the, and I agree with what you're saying. The other side of it is you get in trouble with your roster building when you settle on someone as well, and you bring in someone just to fill a roster spot, like all of a sudden, okay, like the standard, like with all these 5-stars, she signed 5 5-stars. And I did mess up, when I wrote this up yesterday, because I left Kassan Prosper out of the story. And then I think I mentioned it. I remember, I was talking about, them signing Leah Macy at one point during the game last night. And I think I said 5, and then I rattled off the names, and there were only 4 names. And I remember looking at it, and I'm like, hold it. I just said 5, but those were only 4 names. And Kassan Prosper is one of them. Koval is another. Macy is one. Hidalgo is one. And Emma Risch is another one. But, my point was going to be, when you settle just to bring in and say that you've got someone, well, like those players end up sitting on the bench and causing problems, when that's what you're doing, like, look, they don't need, just they don't need to go out and bring in like an Abby Prohaska as an example. Like someone's like, oh, like the home fans, she was almost like an overblown walk-on, like they get excited when she goes out there on the court and it's like, oh, Abby's in the game and that kind of stuff, like she averaged 10.5 points a game in her fifth season last year at San Diego State. That was her peak. You're better off you're basically better off letting someone else develop the 3-star, and then you bring them in. Yeah. And then you bring them in out of the transfer portal, like they overplay their star rating someplace else at a smaller school. And now you bring them in, just kind of like Liza Carlin, like she was a bit under-recruited, coming out of high school, like she was recruited, but, like she told me when I did that interview with her a few months back that, like her phone just blew up the minute her name went into the transfer portal. And it wasn't necessarily like that when she was coming out of high school. And the track record that Ivy's got going out and getting those players out of the portal, I completely agree. It's like, wait, reassess, see what you've got. And I think that they can go out and address that via the portal next year. So I don't think it's the end of the world. I get, like maybe you would want another player, but like if you would brought one in last year, for example, like you've got Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo and Sonia Citron just to start off with in the backcourt. And then you've got Emma Risch coming back, and you also have KK Bransford coming back next year. Like they've got 7 McDonald's All-Americans on the roster right now. And the only reason they don't have 9 is because Prosper is from Canada. So she couldn't be a McDonald's All-American. And Olivia Miles enrolled in the middle of that COVID season, that would have been her senior season in high school. So she didn't qualify to be a McDonald's All-American. So they would have 9 basically McDonald's All-Americans on the roster.
A lot of mouths to feed.
Yes.
And only start 5 at a time.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Joe, have a good one. We will see you later. And, DJ was asking earlier.
Well,
many? Go ahead.
Indy Sailor said, how come Gino Auriemma never had a problem with the 5 stars on his bench? Well, he did it during basically the Nick Saban era where you didn't have to worry about the transfer portal and the NIL.
That's exactly it.
Players can just leave if they're not getting the money or the playing time that they want. You kind of used to be stuck, on these teams essentially. And Nick Saban and Gino could just say, well, you're not good enough yet, and we'll develop you. And
you're going to win national championships.
Yeah, by the time you're a junior and a senior, you'll get your shot and win a national championship.
I mean, that's basically how between UConn and Tennessee. I mean, the reason that there was so much animosity, like between Gino and Pat Summitt was because they were all recruiting the same players and there were only so many places they could go. And so, so they were always butting heads on the recruiting trail, and then they played each other every year. And that's basically it. They were stockpiling the vast majority of the talent. Whereas now, like, that's why, Gino Auriemma continues to like
shout out.
Yeah. Like he's jealous of all the attention that Caitlin Clark got last year, for example. Like the reason he keeps saying, oh, Paige Beckers is better than Caitlin Clark. Well, you didn't recruit Caitlin Clark. Maybe it was because, like you knew that, she wasn't going to go there anyway. But, like that's exactly it. Gino Auriemma, had the market cornered on it for a long time. And now he's ticked off that all that, he's still getting good talent going to UConn. Don't get me wrong, but
he just doesn't have the depth like he used to.
He's not getting it like he used to. Yeah. So Kansas plays BYU this week and Colorado next week. Scale of 1 to 10. Your confidence the Jayhawks will win one of those games.
I'm actually going to go 50-50 on this one. I think KU, I think they have a shot. I think it's a top. I think they win one or the other. I think they've been playing great football as of recent, and especially last week coming off the big win. Some kind of big momentum going into the season, and this kind of goes into what I was talking about earlier. You come to the realization of who you are as a team kind of late in the season and what you're playing for. And I think they have no problem playing a spoiler right now, and that's what they're going to do.
John's very confident, 10 out of 10. DJ is an 8. Man, do I want him to win one of them? Of course. But, I guess it really doesn't help that much if they beat Colorado, other than maybe they keep Colorado out of the Big 12 championship game, and that, they would have the best chance to beat BYU. I'm at a 4. I'm not quite as confident, but the Jayhawks are generally not generally. They're definitely trending in the right direction. I mean, I think that they're the team. Like if you're BYU and Colorado, I don't think you're looking forward to playing Kansas these next couple of weeks. They beat Houston, who beat Kansas State. KU barely lost to Kansas State a few weeks ago. They put 45 on Iowa State and beat them. 5 of their 6 losses are by 1 possession this year. They can score, and Colorado can be scored on. So I'm not quite as confident as some of the rest of you guys, but I'm going to put my confidence at a 4. I think they've got a really good shot to win. I think they're at the very least going to put a scare into one of those 2 teams. The question is, can they finish because of all those close losses I was talking about that they've got this year? Larry's asking Penn State's best win. Again, well, I guess we were talking about Texas. I mean, what is Penn State? Penn State's best win is Illinois, when Illinois was ranked 19th. And Illinois is not nearly as good, but they're a 3-loss team right now. But they also lost to Oregon a couple of weeks ago, but then they lost to Minnesota. I mean, that's Illinois' best win. And like I said, when you look at the 1-loss teams and who they lost to, the committee has definitely ranked them in terms of who the losses were to. That obviously matters to the committee. I don't want to get stuck on that like a broken record. Fill in the blank. Speaking of Colorado, Deion Sanders in Colorado going 7-2 while winning 6 of their last 7 games is blank.
Oh, man. I had this in my head all day. Oh, I got it now. It came back to me.
You found it.
Deion Sanders in Colorado going 7-2 after starting 1-2 and winning 6 of their last games is a whole lot of "I told you so" from Deion Sanders and the boys from Colorado, right? Because I feel like Deion caught a lot of flack, maybe deservedly so, right, for how he handled his transition into becoming a head coach at Colorado, but he low-key guaranteed victories, right? And he said this program's going to get turned around. And what a lot of people do, they made fun of him last year for, I think, going like 6-6 and not really doing a whole lot. But I mean, this season they're already back to 7-2, and you got to remember 2 seasons ago they won like 1 game, no games, and now there's serious contention that they can win the Big Ten championship, right, or at least have a shot at winning the Big 12 championship. So to me, this is Deion Sanders saying loud and proud, "I told you, fool." So,
to me, go ahead,
and he would say it not nearly as nice as I would have.
To me, it's shocking, but it's what's most shocking about it is how quietly it's happened, because there was all this Deion noise at the start of it. Like, he was getting all the attention, especially, okay, you beat a team that just went to the playoff, TCU, to open up the season. But there was all this, and then the season obviously fell off. They ended up being a 4-win team. Well, now they're a 7-win team, and nobody's talking about it. And it's like, is it because of all the, how loud everything was before with Deion? Like, did that quiet it down, like the way he's treated the media? So the media is just basically saying, well, we really don't care about it that much.
We're not going to cover it.
Like, did you bite the hand that feeds you? Like, did Deion not realize that can come back on you as well? Because it's amazing to me how under the radar this is, because they're not necessarily and they're not a national championship contender, but they are at the very least a conference championship contender. And as we all know, if you win your conference championship game, you get an automatic bid into the playoffs, like the 4 highest, ranked conference champions. So I guess, I don't know. It's, like I said, it's crazy. The other thing is the 4-loss team last year, just in terms of TV ratings, they were getting, like, there were a lot more people watching this year, but the ratings are, I don't think it's quite half, but like there's just not nearly as much interest in this whole thing. And I wonder if it's just because Deion blew up so much last year that I
think it's worn
some
off
backlash as a result. Yeah.
Naturally it's worn off, and he's kind of cut the media. They kind of cut each other off to a degree, right? Like, so I just think there's not as much media coverage. And it's just honestly, I don't think people care anymore. It gets to a point where you don't want to talk about the same thing over and over again. It gets tiresome, right? And so that's personally how I like it too. I just like, let Deion do his thing. Let him win football games. If it blows up in his face, it blows up in his face. But he's got to be the one to live with that.
I mean, Andre says they've only won 3 more games than they won last year. So let's see how the rest. But I mean, they won 1 game the year before he got there. So no matter what, I mean,
they're already bowl eligible.
Game. Yeah, like they've already succeeded no matter what happens.
And they're probably a favorite in those last 3 games.
Mm-hmm. Did you have something you want to finish us up with?
Oh, yeah, I do. Thank you for reminding me. This isn't anything crazy. You'll probably say, why did you waste my time? But I thought it was fun. So I got an email today from the Guardians, and they essentially asked, or they're replacing all of the seats in their stadium. And so they're going to put them up for sale. And so my question to you, and also to the general public, is it fair or foul for me to purchase 2 of these seats from the old Guardian Stadium?
You want me to put these in here?
Yeah, it's nothing crazy. Again, it's just your standard, typical, Guardian seats. But let me give my rationale here. The Cubs won the World Series inside this stadium, and I think it would be pretty cool to have a piece from that and an eventual man cave someday and say, again, the Guardians aren't my favorite team. I've gone to a ton of games because I live in Cleveland. But at the end of the day, the Cubs clinched the World Series inside this stadium, and so to have a piece of it would be pretty freaking cool to me.
I would do it. I would buy them. How much are they going for?
What do you think they're going for us? That set of 2 right there.
I would say at least $200.
$300.
300.
$300.
That's not bad.
I got Naomi to say she'd pitch in 50, so I'm already down to 250.
I would do it. I would jump on it. And I think like you said, you're a Cubs fan, and the fact that the Cubs won their World Series in that stadium, I think you do it. You got to go for it.
And then anytime I watch a Cubs game, I can sit in that seat knowing that that's where they won the World Series.
Yeah, it's a good conversation piece.
That's what I mean. And then be like, oh, well, why aren't you a Cleveland fan if you bought Cleveland? Well, because my team won the World Series, and I lived in Cleveland and got the opportunity to buy the seats.
Andre asking cost, what'd you say, $300? How we do it?
$300, yeah. So I think I'm going to, but I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't crazy. That's all I got. That was my fair or foul question to wrap
I like it
today.
Do it. Go for it. Make it happen. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up with that. Great stuff. A lot of great questions on the show tonight. We out. Notre Dame, Virginia, coming up this weekend. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you next week on IB Nation Sports Talk.